Welcome. If you enjoy the content, please subscribe and enable notifications. It was an ordinary Tuesday night at Mark's house, the kind of evening that barely registered in his memory. He was stretched out on the living room couch, half watching a movie he had already seen. It had become his routine, a quiet night to unwind while his wife, Lisa, attended her Spanish classes. These evenings had grown even quieter since she started the lessons, but he had come to appreciate the solitude. Then, something unusual broke the monotony. The phone rang, its sharp sound cutting through the low hum of the TV. Mark frowned, slightly puzzled. It wasn't typical to get calls at this hour. Picking up his phone, he saw Ethan's name on the screen. Ethan was a close friend, the kind of person who usually had a joke or story to brighten the day. Mark answered, expecting a light-hearted distraction. Mark! Ethan's voice sounded off. It lacked his usual cheer and was instead filled with hesitation. Mark immediately sensed something was wrong. Hey, Ethan, what's going on? You okay? Mark asked, sitting upright on the couch. There was an uneasy silence before Ethan finally spoke. Man, I don't know how to say this. It's strange, but I think I saw Lisa. I'm somewhere, and it's not the kind of place you'd expect her to be. Ethan paused, as if struggling to find the right words. Mark felt his stomach knot. What are you talking about? Where are you? I'm at a swinger's house, Ethan admitted bluntly, as though saying it all at once would make it easier. And I swear I saw Lisa. She's here with two guys, laughing, flirting. Mark's world seemed to stop. He blinked, confused, his mind refusing to process the words. Lisa, his wife of nearly 10 years, couldn't possibly be there. She was supposed to be in class, as she always was. He tried to speak, but his voice failed him. Mark, I know this is awful to hear, but I couldn't not tell you, Ethan said, his discomfort evident. I wouldn't have called if I wasn't sure. Mark stood up, pacing the room as a storm of emotions raged inside him. Anger, disbelief, fear. Part of him wanted to hang up and dismiss the idea as absurd. But another part knew Ethan wouldn't fabricate something like this. He had to find out for himself. Are you sure? Mark's voice was barely audible, as though speaking louder might make it true. I'm sure, Ethan replied. I saw her face. I wouldn't have called if I had any doubt. Mark swallowed hard, his heart pounding. He grabbed his car keys, unable to stay still. The quiet normalcy of his night was shattered as he left to confront whatever truth lay ahead. The drive to the address Ethan provided felt interminable, even though it was only 20 minutes. His thoughts swung wildly between logic and emotion. Maybe Ethan had mistaken someone else for Lisa? But then, what if he hadn't? Could he have been so blind to who Lisa really was? When he arrived, the building was nondescript, blending into the night. People came and went, some chatting casually, others carrying an air of secrecy. Mark sat in his car, gripping the steering wheel, his knuckles white. He tried to convince himself it was a mistake, a bizarre coincidence. But deep down, he feared the worst. Stepping out into the chilly night air, Mark felt the cold do nothing to quell the heat coursing through his body. Ethan was waiting near the entrance, his expression uncharacteristically tense. When their eyes met, Ethan gave a small nod but avoided looking at him for long. Is she still here? Mark asked, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. Yes, Ethan confirmed. But are you sure you want to go in? Mark nodded. There was no turning back. Entering the house was like crossing into another world. The dim lighting, soft music, and mingling laughter created an atmosphere that felt both inviting and alien. Mark followed Ethan through the crowd, weaving between strangers who moved with confidence, contrasting sharply with his unease. The faint, heady mix of perfume and other unidentifiable scents heightened his tension. Eventually, Ethan stopped and gestured subtly toward a more secluded area. Over there, he said quietly. Mark looked in the direction Ethan indicated. His eyes adjusted to the scene, and his breath caught. Lisa was sitting on a leather couch, flanked by two men. She looked relaxed, her laughter and smile effortless, as she rested her hand on one man's arm. For a moment, Mark was frozen. His body refused to move, and his mind struggled to make sense of what he was seeing. The betrayal wasn't just in her actions, but in the ease with which she seemed to live this secret life. Then something inside him broke. The paralysis gave way to an almost automatic need to confront her. He took a step forward, then another, each one heavier than the last. His heart pounded in his ears, drowning out the music and chatter around him. When he finally stood in front of her, Lisa's carefree laughter felt like a knife twisting in his chest. "Lisa," he said, his voice shaky but loud enough to cut through the noise. She turned slowly, her eyes meeting his. For a brief moment, everything else faded, leaving only the weight of their shared reality. When their eyes met, Mark saw something flash across Lisa's face. Shock, but only for a fleeting moment. It was quickly replaced by a cold, calculating expression, as though she were already formulating her response. "Mark, what are you doing here?" she asked. Her tone wasn't one of surprise, but carried a hint of defiance, as if she were trying to take control of the situation before he could react. The two men sitting beside her exchanged uneasy glances. One of them, a younger man, attempted to step in. "Hey, man, I think you've got the wrong place. Let's talk this out calmly," he said, trying to diffuse the tension. Mark ignored him entirely. "I asked, what's going on here?" he repeated, his voice sharp and insistent. This time, Lisa's tone turned firmer, almost cutting. "Don't make a scene, Mark. I'm just having fun. Something you've never really understood," she said, her voice calm, yet laced with cruelty. Her words felt like daggers, each one cutting into his pride and dignity. For a moment, Mark stood speechless, unable to process the magnitude of her betrayal. "Having fun? Is that what you call destroying your family? Your home? Fun?" His voice trembled with a mix of hurt and growing rage. Lisa rolled her eyes, exuding an air of indifference. "You wouldn't understand, Mark. That's why I didn't tell you anything," she said, as if the matter were trivial. Around them, the room seemed to fade into the background. Mark no longer noticed the curious stares or whispers from the crowd. He fixed his gaze on Lisa, searching desperately for a glimpse of the woman he had spent nearly a decade with. But the person sitting before him was unrecognizable. A stranger. Without another word, Mark turned and walked away. The knot in his throat made it nearly impossible to breathe, but he refused to break down in front of the onlookers. Each step he took became faster until he was finally outside. The cold night air hit him like a slap, but it also brought a sliver of clarity. He inhaled deeply, trying to steady himself, knowing that nothing in his life would ever be the same again. The drive home was a blur, his mind flooded with fragments of Lisa's words. "I'm just having fun." Each repetition felt like a weight pressing down on his chest. When he arrived, Mark remained in the car for several minutes, staring at the house. The front door seemed like a barrier, symbolizing the reality he now had to face. Eventually, he forced himself inside. The house felt suffocatingly quiet. What had once been a source of comfort now felt alien and oppressive. Mark collapsed onto the couch, the same one where he had been relaxing earlier that evening, and stared into the void. Time dragged on as he sat there, consumed by a need to understand. He couldn't sleep. He could only wait for Lisa to return. Every noise from outside made him glance toward the door, only to find it wasn't her. Finally, around midnight, he heard the key turn in the lock. Lisa entered, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. Her face showed no surprise, just irritation, as though she had expected this confrontation. "So, you decided to wait up for me," she said flatly, dropping her bag on the table and crossing her arms. Mark took a deep breath, trying to control the storm of emotions churning within him. "You knew this was going to happen, didn't you? That I'd find out. That's why you're so calm right now," he said, his voice steadier than he had expected. Lisa sighed as if dealing with something tedious. "Of course I knew. I just didn't think it would be like this. With Ethan calling you." "How cliché," she said, her tone dripping with disdain. The nonchalance in her voice snapped something inside Mark. "How long has this been going on? When did you decide this was normal, going out to have fun like this?" he asked, his voice laced with sarcasm. "Months," she replied without hesitation. "And honestly, Mark, I don't see it as cheating. I needed something you weren't giving me." Her words hit him like a blow to the gut. "Something I wasn't giving you? I gave you a home, stability, a marriage of nearly 10 years. And that wasn't enough?" Lisa laughed bitterly. "You think giving me things is enough?" "Our marriage died a long time ago, Mark. I just didn't tell you because I didn't think you'd get it." Mark's jaw tightened. Deep down, he realized he had sensed something was off but had ignored the signs, unwilling to confront the truth. Still, hearing her say it so callously was like reopening a fresh wound. So that's it? You decided to live a double life and just assumed I'd never know? He asked, his voice trembling with anger. Lisa didn't flinch. I chose to be happy, Mark. If that hurts you, I'm sorry. But I'm not going to apologize for who I am. Her words were the breaking point. Mark stood slowly, his eyes locked on hers. If that's who you are, Lisa, then I'm done. I'm leaving this marriage. Lisa didn't immediately react, but he caught a flicker of something in her expression. Uncertainty or perhaps regret. He didn't stay to decipher it. Instead, he walked upstairs, closed the bedroom door, and began packing his things. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions. Mark knew leaving was the right decision, but that didn't make it any easier. Every corner of the house reminded him of their life together, a life that now felt like it belonged to someone else. The divorce process moved quickly. To Mark's surprise, Lisa treated it as little more than a formality, showing no interest in reconciliation. Her indifference only reinforced his resolve to move on. Ethan, as always, was there to help him through the emotional wreckage. This doesn't define you, Mark. What you do next does. You're so much more than this, Ethan told him one night. Though the words didn't erase the pain, they planted a seed of hope. Mark began to rebuild, step by step. He returned to the gym, rediscovered his love for reading, and started reconnecting with friends. Gradually, he realized life existed beyond the confines of his marriage. One evening, while walking through a park, he stumbled upon a support group for people navigating divorce. Hesitant at first, he eventually joined, finding solace in sharing his feelings without judgment. It was there that he met Emily, a woman who had faced her own betrayal. Her resilience and empathy inspired Mark. She had learned to embrace her scars as a source of strength, and her perspective helped him see his situation differently. Months later, when the divorce was finalized, Mark felt a sense of peace. The pain had transformed into growth, and Lisa had become a closed chapter. In rediscovering himself, he found an unexpected truth. Even after heartbreak, life offers endless chances to rebuild, to grow, and to love again.